Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Riffhard podcast. My guest today is Trev Lukather from the band The Effect, which has a new single out called Toxic Envy. And this was an episode that I think was more related to it on a personal level than anything else, because we both have something we share. We both have dads who became famous in music in their own worlds, right? Like, my dad's not world famous or culturally famous, probably to any of you listening, but in the classical world, it's a different story. And I had to grow up in his shadow and kind of make my own way, regardless of that. And Trev had to do the same thing. I mean, Steve Lukather is a pretty fucking big shadow to have to come out from under. And I think Trev has, and it's an interesting episode. Here goes. All right, Trev Lukather, welcome to the Riffhard podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, my bro.
My pleasure. So, look, I don't want to ask you about stuff that I know for a fact you've been asked about like 90 million times. I'm probably sick of hearing about it, but there's a personal reason I want to talk about your relationship with your dad, because we have kind of a similar background. My dad's a famous symphony conductor, and I got into music through him. Awesome. Played violin and piano at the age of 3, and basically went down that road, eventually got onto guitar, and metal became my career. But like, there was a whole time period where I was going to be an orchestral composer, and growing up in that environment of just being around the best classical musicians in the world, like having them at my house growing up, like having my dad as the person I'd go home to after a music lesson, like, yeah, all of it definitely caused me to turn out a certain way. So I know for a fact that that it had to have affected you in a certain way too. So I'm just curious, for personal reasons, obviously, I want to know a little bit about your upbringing and how you feel that it actually shaped you musically, because I know that the things that people ask me aren't really in line with the truth. People are like, wasn't he like the best teacher ever? I'm like, not exactly. That's not how it worked.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's not at all how it worked. He was not my teacher. It was more like I was home and I was seeing this standard for what's possible, and my mind was open to all these things. So yeah, so I was curious about, like, I guess big picture, how you think it affected you.
Wow, man, that's a lot of what you just said it hits home. I mean, I exactly. My dad wasn't, he wasn't a teacher. I mean, he took my low E and put it to a D, and I barred. He helped me bar, which sounded like a power chord, and he's like, have fun. But really, the teaching was me watching him and being in the room, and yeah, man, like having the people around the house. I mean, I basically wanted to get into music. One of my first memories is playing music, drumming. And I did that specifically. I got the bug so early, it's almost to the point where I don't even remember what caused me to get the bug to play music, because it was so early on in my life where it's just always been a part of it. But I think it was just one of those things where my guess of my being is that, like, I wanted just to hang out with everybody. I wanted to be a part of the gang. I looked up to my dad from beginning of my life. I was very close to my parents. So, like, both my mom and my dad, and my mom was more of the person, funny enough, was more of the person that got my musical taste, because, Pop was always, when he was touring or he was in the studio, the last thing that dad wanted to do is blast a bunch of music through the house. It's like, yep. My mom was the one when we were in the car and playing me, like, Pink Floyd and Duran Duran, like during the time of Ordinary World and Journey and Bee Gees and all these awesome bands that my mom hit me to. But I just wanted to hang out with Pop and his friends, and you know, it's like anybody, and I know you relate to this, is when you're growing up in a household your whole life, you don't really think anything's different than what it is. Like
No, you
your
don't
dad does
realize
what
how
your
weird it is.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you don't actually realize that till a lot later on in life. And you know, it took me till about, I don't know, 12 years old to realize that, you know, I always knew my dad was a little out of the box because I went to a Catholic school, and my dad would show up with the big hair, and he had this like, you know, Cadillac, just like he would roll up with like, you know, one of his buddies or just himself, and like he would wear a shirt saying Catholic school kids gone bad, you know, or a Chucky the Doll t-shirt, or like Rage Against the Machine, fuck you, I won't do what they tell me shirt, picking me up from Catholic school that he put me in, by the way. And you know, I always knew dad was a little different, but the extent of like him and his friends and who was at the house, and knowing that they were very important to the world musically, took me till when he took me on tour when I was 12. But yeah, man, I could just only say that it was just me wanting, and I always compare it to like kids throwing the baseball at their dad,
Yep.
or you know, the football, and that bonding experience of watching a football game together or whatever. It's like that was music for dad and I. So, you know, having a drum kit in my room, dad would come in, there's a little amp, he'd get a guitar, we would just jam together. And that was our, you know, bonding. And we just always had that bond from the beginning is music. So that was just me relating to my dad. And I obviously had the bug before I even knew what life was. And
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
the best way to explain it.
Do you did you experience this in high school where you try to have bands with kids who didn't grow up like that, and getting frustrated just because being around your dad's friends and your dad, and like seeing the standard, like the world-class standard for what like professional musicians do, like,
Yeah.
and then high school musicians, was that ever frustrating?
Well, funny enough, man, is I was very much linked through my life. Like I had a band with Brett Tuggle's son, who, you know, recently passed away, but he played in David Lee Roth's band. He played in Fleetwood Mac. And you know, he toured with my dad on his solo stuff. So, and Matt was around my age. So
Oh, that's
we
great.
started,
That's
yeah.
great.
So we started band. Matt was actually, I was drumming, and Matt was such a great guitar player, and we liked the same bands like Korn, and like we were very like heavy, like, you know, into the new metal shit. And then I got linked, and you know, with Ryan Rabin, who is Trevor Rabin's son, who I was named after. I was named after Trevor Rabin, and my dad and him were buds, and they linked Ryan and I together. And Ryan was an amazing drummer and already producing at 13 years old. And he went on to like start the band Group Love, and he's a killer producer, songwriter now. And he always has been, actually. I mean, he was so ahead of the game. But it's really funny because I didn't really know, I wasn't really hip to Trevor Rabin as a player, because when I met him, he was composing like your dad. Like he was doing all, like he was doing you know, Armageddon, and he was doing, you know, Remember the Titans, and he was a scoring guy. But I didn't get really hip to his guitar playing until I was about 19, when I really dug into the Yes stuff, and then his solo stuff. I was like, wow, this guy is incredible. And he was obviously, you know, there's always a family bro. So yeah, I was linked with a lot of people similar to me that were always kind of like had that gift and a little ahead of their time. So I was
That's good
always
parenting.
playing with people. And then when I got into high school, I started being in bands. When I was 15, the guys in my band were 21 plus. So I'd never really played with people in high school, because my high school was a little on the outskirts of the valley here in LA, and no one played music. I was like the total oddball guy out. So, but it was cool to the people in my school, because then all of a sudden there was me playing. I would be playing shows, and so the high school friends and a bunch of people from high school would come and see me play, and they were totally stoked about it. But weren't a lot of musicians in my school.
No, but that's really good. Good on that collective group of parents to link the kids together. And I wonder if that was just proximity, or if it was a conscious thought, like we should put them together because they're going to get really frustrated if they're not around, similar types of kids. But I think that that's really, really smart to link you guys up, having similar backgrounds and like similar mentalities and similar standards and all that. Because I can tell you, not getting linked up with people like that growing up was super, super frustrating. It wasn't until later that that I found people that shared like seriousness and had standards, but it was really tough. And then also having a band in high school was tough because all the other parents didn't see music as an actual career path, right? Yeah. So, but obviously my parents saw music as a career path, and obviously your parents did too, and all the parents of your bandmates. It was like, I mean, why wouldn't they see music as a career path? Music is what made their lives possible, I guess. So, so there wasn't that weird stuff about do it as a hobby, or you should really like do something else and do it for fun. Or none of that talk in my house. But I was playing with people who were like not allowed to take it seriously, but probably for good reasons. I mean, let's be real, probably for good reasons, but just like for the sake of having a good time and getting better as a kid, I think it's really, really awesome that you got paired with people who were on the same page. I think that's amazing, actually.
And I think that you could agree that like when you're playing with people that, especially when I got into high school, and then I was playing with people in their 20s, like, they're so great. They were great musicians. So it made me want to be a better musician. Yes. I always wanted to be in bands of people that were a lot better than me, because that made me want to become a better player. So, and also, I mean, the standard was set, like, like when you're surrounded by like the greatest musicians in general, and then also being, in a room with people, not only like, the rock star guys, but like, session musician guys that like played with everybody for a living, and the people that need to go into the room and kill it in 1 to 2 takes max. Like those were the people that I was surrounded by. So that was always a level that I had to achieve. And my dad would, really stress me being, getting the studio experience, playing to a click, rhythm was everything. Mm-hmm. Songwriting was everything. Because he says, listen, man, looking at the house I grew up in, it's like, songwriting is everything, man. And he's like, that is what can pay for your life, the rest of your life, And of course, this is before Spotify got involved and then really started dwindling all of that stuff. But like, it's just like songwriting is key. And those are also, that's like your mark. Like you look at artists, Van Gogh, or you look at anybody that's like that piece of art that will be there forever, way past when you're gone. Like I think that it's leaving your mark in this world, writing songs in particular. So that was something I was really focused on growing up. And, so I was always, pushing myself and being in the room with people that were so much better than me. So I can just keep pushing my way up and up and up and up the hill to eventually get to a place where I'm comfortable. And to be honest, I don't think you ever do get comfortable. I think you shouldn't. I think if you're content, then there's something wrong. And now being in my band currently, I'm playing with Nick Collins, man. I mean, geez, that cat, like at 16, playing with his dad and playing in Genesis in his teens. I mean, that's incredible, man. It's crazy the level of like of talent Nick has. So when you're playing with a cat like that, and you're arranging and writing stuff, it makes you want to be a better player, better songwriter. And Emmett's vocal and how just natural he is. And incredible talent, and really the sky's the limit with his vocals. So it just opens up a lot of things which make all of us, and I'll never, it's funny because when you grow up, and you can agree with this too, man, is when you grow up with such amazing people around you, and that all Nick's the same way. It humbles you so deep that like,
Oh yeah.
you never can really take the, like, when someone's complimenting you and loving what you're doing, it's hard to accept it because you were surrounded by these like alien people,
So like,
and
so you think this is good? I know what actually good is.
exactly, it's like, I'm not worthy, man, so like if anyone like loves on us, and it's funny because Nick's so similar. Nick is so humble, and when you kind of are in the room and you're like, wow, like, and then there's love directed this way, and then I compliment Nick, or Emmett. It's very hard. We're all very like, we're like, oh man, thanks. Like, we're not like, that's right, look, yeah, we're great. It's like, we're very like,
well, you're used. It's weird when you have a genius dad that's world recognized, and like all their friends are like geniuses that are world recognized. It's hard to like see yourself as anything other than okay, I think. Something I was wondering about, I'm curious your take, was when you have the kids of famous artists or incredible artists, or sorry, incredible and famous artists, basically I've noticed that like you have like two camps. You have the camp that like go on and do really cool stuff. Like somehow they get it. They like get it. They like understand what it takes, and they just follow in the footsteps. So you have the others who are like the direct opposite, and are like really bad at music, or like really bad at acting, or like just really bad. And my theory is that obviously, talent is, there's a spectrum of talent and a spectrum of effort, but on a psychological level, what I noticed is that some of them see the results and they don't pay attention to what it took to get to those results. And obviously they weren't born yet when a lot of the work was done. So they probably don't even think about that part of it, and just, I guess, didn't pay attention when they were growing up to all the work that was happening that created the results. And then I think there's this other group of kids that's been so like dialed in to what was happening, like the music and all the players, that even if they didn't know that they were consciously understanding how much work was going in, they got it. They got that part of it. I think that's to me, that's the biggest differentiator. I'm curious what your opinion is.
That's really a great take, man. You're a very smart cat, man. I think that you're absolutely right. There's certain people that, I don't know, man. I know a lot of kids of second generation people that are super fab. Like they almost act like they accomplished what their parents accomplished. It was like almost like it was like they're doing, maybe swimming in the nutsack. They sent all that information up. I don't know, but like. But yet they're the ones that usually don't have the talent. I think that, people that really work hard at it understand that it's not easy, and that it's even harder being someone, coming from a successful music family, because instantly you're compared to something. Like, instead of someone just listening to what you do and giving you just a complete blank slot, like just like taking in what they're listening to, you're just gonna get instantly compared to who your parent is. And my pop is so incredible. I mean, there'll never be another Steve Lukather, and that's a good thing, because his path is his path, his career, unbelievable. Those days also can't be touched anymore. Like the days of the 70s and 80s, the best time, I feel, in music and the business, were like, printing money, man, the records being sold, and and really having to play your instrument, and you're competing against these incredible legends. And so I think like it was almost like the Olympics. It wasn't almost, it was the Olympics of music at that time. It was like, who are the best cats, who can really write the best songs or play the best in the studio. And that was an incredible time. And trust me, I really do wish that we still lived in those times, because I feel that's what devalued the music industry, is when anyone can do it, and or anyone can, even if you're not a singer, you can sound like you're incredible because of Melodyne or production or whatever. That really just, you're competing against the world. I mean, like the real world. I mean, it was always competing against the world even back in the day, but there was just maybe a few hundred bands. Now it's, feels like there's a few 100 million bands, but it's like, so like, but my dad's career is my dad's career, and it can't be touched. And who he is as a player, and his journey of his life is one of a kind, man. And and it's so funny, it's a double-edged sword, because if I sounded just like my dad and I played just like him, like clone, I could play all the licks that he does, everything, I'd be hated. Like, find your own fucking thing, man. Oh, you're just, but then the fact that I'm different, then everyone's like, oh, he's not his dad. It's like there's like this weird damned if you do, damned if you don't thing. But I always wanted to take what I can from him, take what I can from all my influences like David Gilmour and Trevor Rabin and these guys. That's like, well, if I mesh all of those kind of influences together, but I still have that natural, because I guess you say your fingerprint as a guitar player is your vibrato. That's your fingerprint. And, taking that and making it me. And, I've now finally got to a place where I feel like, oh, I have my sound as a player. And, I'm myself, and people dig what I do, man. It took some time, a lot of hate, and there'll always be haters, man. There's always going to be people that hate me just because I squirted out my dad. I'm saying the squirting out of the nutsack again, but I'm going to say it again because it's true. People instantly want to hate on you. And it's so funny that the Nepo baby thing, that's been such a thing. And for some reason, it seems to be the most negative when it comes to music. And I feel like if you put what's so weird to me is that clearly, like, Nick and you and myself and a lot of people I know have put in the time. It's clear, the playing, like, there isn't something that we just picked up and like, oh, I know a few chords, now I'm a superstar and I got everything handed to me. It's not that. So I don't understand. And it's so funny how we can have like rulers of countries based on bloodline, just being born into it. Now you rule a country. Now, maybe you're not fit to rule a country just because your parent is who they are, but that's okay. But God forbid you pick up a guitar, it's
strange.
Hatred.
Yeah, I guess these days I'm a little fortunate because the world of metal knows so little about the world of classical music that they can't compare it. But in the earlier days, like before my band got signed, when we were an Atlanta local band and my dad was the music director of the Atlanta Symphony, and he was in the newspaper all the time, that caused a lot of hate from the other bands in the scene. When we got signed to Roadrunner, holy shit. Yeah. Like the hate that went around and the stories, like, Eyal's dad bought the record deal. It's like, I don't know how that works, how you buy a record deal, but like all these kinds of like crazy ass stories. Like, my dad doesn't know anybody in the metal industry. Like, metal and classical music industry could not be further apart. They don't know anything about each other.
But shredding, like that classical,
yes.
The fact you said violin, I was like, oh man, like the shredding coming from learning violin. I mean, if the fact you can play violin is incredible, man. Like, what a hard instrument to pick up. And yet, if you could bring some of those classical vibes. I mean, look at Eddie Van Halen, man. I mean, he was literally, it's just symphony, classical vibe on his soloing because he was such a great piano player and grew up in a household of having to learn that stuff. And like, I think they go hand in hand, man. But yeah, it's so funny you said that, oh, your dad bought the record deal. Dude, I just did a thing for Guitar World, just put out a piece that I did with an interview I did. And I saw this comment, and it made me like laugh. I'm like, wow, so out of touch. Is this one person on Facebook says, because I was saying a quote that they put as like the headline quote was, I was talking about how important it is to be in a band now, like just collaborating with other musicians and that feeding off of each other. And I feel that that's such a lack. There's a lack of that now because of TikTok and because like everyone's just, having to make content on their own every day. So you kind of take away that getting in a room and being in a band because everyone's kind of seeing how, the way you make it is like, do as much content as possible. And you have to just kind of rely on yourself, which, most people do. But like being in a band is so important. And as you know, it's like, especially growing up as a musician, like feeding off of other musicians and getting that experience and going out and playing and playing in front of like 5 people or playing in front of 500 people or 5,000 people or 50,000 people. You need to have all of that experience to really own that being a musician as a career, because you need to know how to handle every single situation, a crowd that loves you, a crowd that hates you. And so I say this, and then someone says, how about you shut the fuck up? And it's like, how about you shut the fuck up from your yacht? And I just started laughing, man, because I fucking read that while we were on tour with Billy Idol, and it's Nick, Emmett, and I in a van sleeping in the same hotel room, and like no crew, no nothing. And I'm reading this, shut the fuck up and sit on your yacht and don't tell people and preach how to fucking do anything. And I'm just because I come from a family of successful musicians, they think that like I just have the direct line to the bank account and being like, oh yeah, Nick too. And like, well, yeah, we're just like, doing the private jet opening for Billy Idol. Man, that'd be nice. But like, we were raised right to work for what you gotta get. You gotta earn it. And in those days haven't ended, So
no, they definitely
funny
haven't ended.
The the perception of people that think that what life is for this Nepo baby shit. But like the reality is we're working as hard as anybody else. Actually, sometimes because you have to deal with the haters of that side of things. We are earning every bit of of buzz that this band's getting. Now, obviously, yeah, I'm not stupid. Nick's not stupid either. We know that our story and the fact that our dads are who they are generates a buzz. But we always said, and I believe this 100%, is doors do open because of where you come from, but you have to. It's so much more important. You have to walk through the door and own the room. You have to own the room because people are wanting to see you suck. They want to see you, blow it. They just they're waiting for it, man. And so it's a lot more pressure. And yet it keeps you it just keeps you motivated and it makes you want to, like I said, it's that constant wanting to be better and just, going out of your comfort zone and proving that you can do it, So,
I think there's this thing, man, where this myth, I really think it's a myth and it's pervasive and you cannot get people to not believe it. It's so I kind of have quit trying. Like I won't engage with people one-on-one about this, but like you see it online, and I guarantee you, comments to this episode will say that too. Will tell me that I'm wrong. But there's this idea that you can buy success in music or in movies when that's just not true, because you can't buy fans. You can't buy the audience. There's no amount of, like, if you look at the Marvel movies that they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on and then they tank, Like that's a case in point. Or how many times have we seen major labels just put an insane amount of money into an artist and then it goes nowhere. Sometimes it's a good artist, but for whatever reason, it doesn't connect with the public,
Yeah.
and it goes nowhere. And no amount of it, you can put money into promotion. So yeah, so maybe there's a big radio campaign. Maybe there's a lot of money for social media influencing. There's a lot of money put behind this artist. But if the audience votes no, like the audience votes no, and there's nothing anybody on the record industry side of it can do about that. You cannot buy people's opinions when it comes
100%.
to music. So there's, yeah, I mean, a door might open because you know somebody, sure. That doesn't mean you're walking through the door or staying in the room or anything like that. So people will say, well, yeah, so you should appreciate that you had the door open. It's like, yeah, but anyone can get doors opened. It's very easy. It's actually very easy to get opportunities in the music industry. What's very difficult is to do anything with those opportunities. There's millions of opportunities out there. It's how to actually turn the opportunity into something. That's what's difficult. And then after you turn an opportunity into something, sustaining it, that's even more difficult. But I don't buy that you can just plant somebody, throw some money, a lot of money into it, and then boom, you have a hit. Like maybe there's got to be a few times where it happened to have worked, but there are also times where people win the lottery, you know? So
Totally.
like, crazy shit happens, but like as a practice to like build an industry on, that seems really stupid. That if that was like the strategy for labels to just like make plants, that would be really, really dumb. They'd be gambling a lot of money on something that's very, very, very likely to fail. I mean, that's not how people at record companies find artists that they're going to push. They they're looking for clues that the investment's going to work out for them. They're not trying to create something out of nothing.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's a little more dangerous now with the label sitch because, now they're signing a ton of things and they're throwing things against the wall. If it doesn't stick once, you're toast, and that's a rough thing because, you're kind of signing your life away. And then that's why we haven't signed a record deal. I mean, we've been offered a few and they're pretty terrible. And I know record deals in general are terrible, but now it's like, hey, can you at least give me some lube before you fuck me up the ass, So, it was just kind of.
It doesn't have to be dry.
It doesn't have to be dry, man, and
have some courtesy.
Exactly, man. And I just, earning, we want to build the buzz in order to not be so that, because we want to have something to feed off of by our organic growth of building an audience. And but it's so dangerous now because before, back in the day, they would nurture artists, give them an album or two or three to even find their thing, and then it would take off. Now it's like singles. Like if your first single doesn't take, they get dropped, or most second single. It's a scary time, man. And you're right. They could throw, especially if they throw a bunch of money into a single and then it doesn't take off. It's like, oh, well, that's bad investment. See you later. Bye.
Yeah.
And it does not care. It doesn't matter. Sometimes great stuff, man. I mean, God, there's so many great records I've heard that weren't huge for artists that we know. They were so good. And it's like, why didn't this take, but like, you just never know, man. The things that you think are a guaranteed smash are usually not. It's the one that it's the throwaway tune on your record that's usually the one that takes. So it's just like, you never know, man.
It's just, you cannot predict where the collective unconscious is. And it's one of those, if there's any luck in it at all, like I'm kind of like a make your own luck person, but I do think there's some luck involved in the music game, and the luck is in if you happen to create something at the time where the audience is like spiritually, emotionally, like socially ready for it. Where it's like the thing they wanted, but they didn't know they wanted. And then when they heard it, it like filled that hole or something in their souls. And that's what makes an actual hit, is those two things get aligned. And predicting that is like trying to predict the stock market. Like it's been proven you cannot trick the stock market. I think it's a very similar thing. It's like if you're trying to like predict where the collective subconscious of the masses like can't do that. There's just some artists who I think for whatever reason happen to be in line with it for a long time. But even artists that have a lot of hits, like that only like that peak alignment with the public, that doesn't last forever.
No,
just because it's impossible.
It's like a lightning in a bottle era of time where like you connect to that, and then hopefully it builds. You have enough success and enough songs that are known to have a lifelong career and tour for the rest of your life. So it's definitely one of those things that I don't believe anyone can really take credit for. I don't think that anything that songs from any artist, especially myself, do. I mean, this is what I only can speak from my own personal experiences, and I really do see this a lot with artists too that I really respect, is people can't take credit for the songs that are written because they don't know where it comes from. Like you don't know, like all of a sudden this riff, this melody and everything's making sense, and it might be about like how I would never say that in a million years, but why did that just come out of my mouth and my mind? It's like I'm not a religious guy, very spiritual guy, man, but like I definitely feel that I call them my invisible friends. It's like you sit down and nothing's there, and then pop, like out of nowhere, all of a sudden there's something that can connect with a lot of people. It's such a if to me it's like that is like the evidence of magic is music. That it's something you can't see. You don't know where it comes from, but it's something that's universally loved by, I mean, I would even say outside of us as human beings, but like our dog Riv, my wife and I's dog, she sings, man. Like I'll be playing, she starts howling and singing. Like music connects to all things. And I think that's just like, that is the proof of God, I guess you could say, and I think that everyone's like is kind of like, they're channeling something. You're channeling something that you can't explain. And I'm just, when I talk to other musicians about it, songwriters, they all feel the same way. I think that you could be pretty, that's when you got to maybe keep the ego in check, is when you're starting to take all credit for everything. I can't take credit. I've never had a lesson in my life. I don't know how I play. And then when I want to produce and engineer, it comes naturally to me. When I go on a piano and start writing, I can play piano. How do I play piano? I don't know. I don't know anything. And I don't want to take, and I can't take credit for anything, man. So I don't know. It's a trippy thing. And I feel that everyone has that gift, though. It's not just music, but I compare it to like a brain surgeon or someone that builds a house, or someone that made this table, or anything, the microphone you're using, the phone we're on. Like there are these people that everyone's born with some purpose and gift, that something in their life they were either naturally drawn to, or some kind of experience in their life was a light switch, and then they become who they become. But that's what keeps the world going round, man, is everyone having these moments, and they turn into something. They turn their life into that path. And then, you become your own rock star, as I say, So
when you're writing, and I guess the switch gets flipped, or you start downloading the material, how do you know the difference between when, when you're writing, just trying to write, and when, I guess, let's just call it inspiration.
Yeah.
Like when the stuff comes in that you don't know where it's coming from, versus when you're just consciously trying to write. Is there, I mean, talk me through that process for you.
I think I know.
How does that happen?
I sit down, I either feel it or I don't. I feel like, when that, what I was saying, like the channeling and the invisible friends, like you feel the presence there or you don't. Sometimes you're just, when you're trying, when it's not naturally coming, it's like, what's the point? I feel
I've been able to get the switch to come on. Sometimes it never does, but I've been able to coax it into showing up. I have like a few tricks I came up with that work sometimes, but it's not as good as when it just comes out of nowhere on its own.
Yeah, I agree. And I tend to shut it off. Like I like decompress. Like with our record, I was in that zone of like, then there's the inspiration and when you get excited about something, I feel like maybe that door opens a little wider, so you're able to sit down and really bring it. And I don't know, you have that natural instinct of knowing what's cool and not cool. Like, oh, that's not strong, or something you start writing like this is strong, and then all these changes start happening pretty immediately, and all of a sudden, within like 5-10 minutes, you have like a whole map out of a song, and then like, when you get together with Emmett and write top line, and then it's just flowing so easily, and the lyrics are coming, the hooks coming.
So it's quick. So it's quick like quick. That. It's 5-10 minutes. For the bones of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
that's
makes
crazy.
sense.
I mean, that's a crazy thought, because people are like, what?
No, well, it's crazy if you're talking about like full arrangements and stuff like that. But if you're talking about, this is like the bones of the song.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I feel that's when that's the good one. I mean, if you really, dig any interviews with, artists that say, oh man, like this huge song of theirs, well, I wrote that in 15 minutes. People might be like, what? I mean, Dolly Parton wrote, what was it? She wrote I Will Always Love You and Jolene in the same day.
Yeah. The thing is, when people hear that, I think that people who hear that, they don't understand what the artist means. Like, they know the song as the production and arrangement. Like, so when someone in the public hears a song, they're thinking of that finished product, and that didn't take 15 minutes, obviously.
No, that definitely didn't.
Yeah. So they don't, I think the public doesn't understand what an artist means when they say, I wrote that in 15 minutes or in 30 minutes or whatever. Like they don't know what like the bones of a song is. Kind of like with an orchestral composition, like in the old days. And I'm sure some people still do this now, where they would compose like a symphony on the piano, like the original versions of just about every single piece from before the computer showed up, all the way back to the 1600s. It was written on a piano, and then two lines, treble and bass clef, and then orchestrated, then basically broken out for the orchestra. But like, it started as a piano piece that one person sat there and wrote. And I think a lot of people who listen to orchestral music can't imagine it as like one piano, but that's actually what makes it work, is the fact that it can be done by one piano. But similarly, when you hear a modern artist talking about, I wrote the song in 15 minutes, and they hear the song in its finished form, and they're like, I don't understand. It's like, because that's not what the artist means. That took a lot more than 15 minutes.
It definitely did. And then, and I think that people kind of have the misconception that like, that music is so easily recorded and it takes you no time and you just put it out. And that's what's kind of also devalued music a little bit is I think people thinking that it's super easy to just get something together and done. And when you're really putting your heart and soul into it, it's not an overnight thing. I mean, you care so much about the details of the presentation of something that means so much to you, and it's doing justice for what you believe in. And if the song that you're recording is something you believe in, which I think most people that go into the room and fully record a song is obviously something they believe in. You care so much about the minor details of it, and I produce for a living, and I produce the band's record, and so a lot of that pressure too of delivering for the guys, and really caring about it. It takes time. It takes time to really finally just be like, you know what, signing off, see you later, go to mix. And then that's a whole other stress, because then you're like, the mix is everything. You could have a killer too, but if the mix is not there, it's not going to be it. It's not going to work. So the details of that, and then the mastering, it's like there's so many, chapters, I guess, that leads to the end, and all those chapters are very important, and you can't skip a chapter, and you can't just breeze through it. You really have to, in detail, word for word, take it all in and appreciate it for you to feel comfortable.
So when you write, when you get the inspiration and you have the bones of the song in 5-10 minutes, you take it to the band, then what's the next step?
So
how do you present it? Like, do you record a scratch version?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't do it like, for instance, if I'm, for our band, for the effect, like, Nick is so out of the box as far as a player. He's so unique, and his approach to songs is not like a rock drummer where it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna hear 4 on the floor here, or he's so out of the box. So, other than Unwanted, the first song that we did, which Nick was on the road with Mike and the Mechanics, so we kind of had everything built and the vocal before Nick really was able to track the drums. Outside of that song, I was like, I don't want to give you an idea. He's like, what are you feeling here? And I said, I don't want to give you an idea of anything. I don't want to know. Like, what I want to do is I'm going to set up, I'm going to find the right feel of as far as a tempo, and I'm going to send you a whole map out of the foundation of the song musically. And I want you to sit with it and put your heart into that and your arrangement into that. And then when you're comfortable, because Nick lives in Miami, I was like, FaceTime me and let's go over the parts. And that was our process. And I would be blown away every time. Every song I was blown away by Nick's approach. And then I would be like, and then my producer side of me is like, hey, well, what if we go full time here? Or maybe you do a crazier fill here. Or maybe, let's go to the crash there instead of the ride, or open hi-hat there. Very little tweaks, but the overall arrangement was there. And it was so great for me to do my job properly too, is letting each musician that was a part of it bring their thing, so I wasn't stepping on their toes. So then I also get to listen to it as a listener. So I'm not too married or too involved where, like, I don't know what's cool anymore. Like each thing, each piece of the puzzle put together in a song was surprising me, which then made my job easier to do. And my parts as a player, my guitar solos or whatever, and the top line, we kind of Van Halen'd it, where like we would piece all the music together as a whole, done, without top line written. So when we have it all together, that's when we would write the top line. So even with the keyboards, because we had a keyboard player, and he would kind of sometimes add parts that completely would change the direction of like a melody choice. So it's kind of like, let's all put everything on there and then look at the music as a whole, and then let's then dive into the top line. And that was kind of, that's what the Van Halen brothers did is they would have the whole music done, and then Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar would come in and write top line to it. So I thought it was cool because you're able to build a musical piece that you're super excited about, which then opens a lot more ideas.
The idea too of like leaving that much room for the other people. Now, granted, different genre of music, but in the metal world a lot, you get a lot of band leaders, and this is both in like amateur and pro bands, where like there's like one or two people, usually one, that kind of like write like 90% of like everything, and will like give like fully arranged. I mean, I do a lot of this too, but I try to pull the throttle back for the reasons you just said. But like, yeah, they'll give the band like fully arranged demos where it's like, yeah, I've changed the parts, but like you're already putting ideas in their heads, like drum parts, everything. And it takes a lot of trust, I think, to just hand them I guess what I'm getting at is that's a lot of trust in a really good way for you to be able to just hand it off and be like, just do your thing. I don't want to give you any ideas. Surprise me. That's sick.
Yeah. I mean,
that's
I think
awesome.
that you have to be, I think, you have to have trust in you're getting married to multiple people, and being in a band. So it's like, you have to have that trust, and you have to have that confidence in them to know that they're going to bring it. And with these guys, man, there was never a doubt in my mind I wasn't going to be super stoked, and even when there was certain layers of music, I was always stoked with Nick, but like, when we're going through the keyboard part, sometimes, the sound's not there, or why don't we switch the part there? Or like, maybe there's too many bass lick stuff. Like there's things that you can like, that's when you can kind of get a little more particular. But I knew with everyone involved in this record that they are so great at approaching their arrangement takes of parts, and I felt very confident that I was going to get really excited about everything. And what was so cool is the respect was there on my end, where then they trusted me in the seat I was in producing, that if I said, hey man, let's switch this up, it wasn't an argument. It wasn't like, what, dude, this is the part, deal with it. There was none of that. It was the respect was in the room with everybody involved, which was so cool. Because once everyone has their place and knows their place of like being in a band, what they bring so strongly to the table, then there shouldn't be really a lot of argument. It should be an easy ride, this album was probably the easiest record I've ever made in my life, because all those roles were respected with everybody, and everyone was each other's biggest fans. So it made it so much easier to do. There wasn't an ego in the room.
That's great. I think when there's that kind of trust and respect, it makes things like giving feedback and asking for tweaks a positive thing, where people will look at it as an opportunity to make things better or to get better, as opposed to getting shot down. It's an opportunity is being presented to level up, and that's good for everyone.
You're very deep, man. You get it. It's probably why you have a very successful podcast too, and you've been a part of it, but you've been also a part of it your whole life. And once you know that and you learn, you take everything in, man. You have the right mindset, and you're a very smart.
Thanks, man.
Smart person.
Well, been around people who don't like feedback, and I've also been on the side of it where I didn't like getting feedback and like had to like grow up. Like I've felt the sting in the studio with a producer, like when something wasn't good enough. But puts hair on your chest. It's a good thing.
Because you have plenty of it, man.
you have to get humbled a few times, which it's really good. But you end up realizing like for me, after the big takeaway ended up being was that the most successful bands, after all my experiences and then doing a bunch of these, talking to people and hearing about what makes their band work, the thing that they all have in common, all the successful bands I've spoken to, is they have really, really good communication and trust on a musical level. They don't always get along, but like when it comes to that real basic foundational stuff, the communication level is like a priority. It's a priority for them to keep that communication going, and for there to be like an open. I hate to use the safe space term, but like in a non-cheesy way, like it's safe to say you don't like something or that something should be better. That because being able to handle that is what keeps people from not resenting each other musically, and what keeps the music evolving, and what leads to a happy time if everyone is on that page. But I do think that it's not in our nature to just be like that. Like I think in our nature, if it's like a very natural thing to take offense to someone criticizing your music or wanting to cut a part you wrote or something because you worked hard on it, and it means a lot to you. So you have to learn how to deal with it. You got to grow up a little. But I think it's important. It's really important, and getting to that point where you're working with people like that, like you're saying, like with your current band, it's awesome. It's awesome to be at that point.
Yeah. And, I mean, like you said, man, being humbled out was basically growing up, I mean, I remember, I'll never forget like playing my dad my first demo when I was 15. And, I listened to that now and I'm like, oof, but at the time I was pumped. I was like, this is greatness.
What did he say?
He said, that's nice, man. Come play 150 shows and come back to me and we'll talk. Because
right.
I was very like,
reasonable.
Yeah. And I was like, hey man, played for a record company. Like it was one of those humbling moments where I thought that my pop was going to tell me it was great and that, my career was going to be made. And then, he was like, no, man, no, come back to me 150 shows. And he kind of like giggled, like laughed. It was like, and I was like, man, I was so hurt, but it was the greatest advice.
No, that's great though.
But it was the greatest advice I ever got, and in the studio, hey man, you're ahead. Hey man, what's up? Like, because there was a few times early on, in my bands and my deans that my pop would help produce, and he would be on my ass, man. Like, hey, you're ahead. Come on, man, get it together. What's going on here? These things where you're put on the pressure, a lot of pressure put on you, and I ended up thriving in that pressure, and it's only because my pop pushed my ass, man. Like he really,
totally.
Wasn't going to sugarcoat anything. And me as a producer, and what's great too is that I'm a very blunt guy, man. Like I feel like if you try to sugarcoat things, it's just wasting energy and time. If you could just say certain things right off the bat, say, listen, man, this isn't, or I'll say something super quick, but it's understood. It's never meaning to be insulting in any way. It's just more productive of like, hey, that's, this and that. Like my dad's, you're ahead. Come on, man. What are you doing? Or like, hey man, you're pitchy there. Like, or let's switch the voice tone up, or, with any singer I work with, Emmett's really, really like unbelievable, man. Cause he's so well trained and he's very operatic. Like when he warms up, he's doing opera, and so like he could do like, we have different versions of his voice where it's like, he gets into this really growly, kind of really growly, like bluesy voice, and then he has the poppy voice, and then he has the soft voice, and then he has like just the super like head voice hitting the high notes, but people might think he's screaming, but he's not. If you're in the room, it's not loud, but it sounds loud on the recording because he's just trained. But like, I just think that, I don't know, man, growing up the way I did, we don't have time to sugarcoat things. And I think that,
man, you're reminding me of something. When I was 15, I played a show and my dad came to it, and it was a good show. Like we had like huge pits. We did well. blew the other bands off the stage, and I thought for sure he'd think it was cool. And I asked him what he thought, and he was like, "It's just four chords. Like, you need to forget these guys," in his accent, and just worry about getting better. Worry about your own level. Don't even worry about these guys you're playing with. It's like, but we were better than the other bands. It's like, yeah, but you're comparing yourself to the worst bands on earth. What do you sound like compared to the best bands? It's like, oh, great. Now, then I thought about that, and that I was like, oh yeah, if you could put us next to some of the best bands, I'd want to crawl into a hole. But
wow,
I
that's
mean,
great advice.
worry about your own level. Where he was like, you need to be better, and yeah, and just forget these guys. Just get better. Is probably some, and stop comparing yourself to the worst. Like, compare yourself to the best and see where you stand.
That's so true, because if you're the greatest musician in the room, you're in the wrong room, you know?
Yeah, if you're like the best of the worst, it's like, yay, cool, cool, yeah. So
but see, and at the time, you're probably completely annoyed by that, and completely
yeah,
like,
I was definitely,
yeah, you were pissed. You're like, well, fucking, what the fuck, Dad? You know, like, where's the love? But it's that knowledge of experience and age that, I mean, man, I wish I could go back to my 20-year-old self and reverse smack them, you know, like, of just things that I thought, like, oh, I'm saving. Like, there was like this like tune I wrote with Hailstorm, and already had one killer tune with them, and there was this other tune I had, and I was working with Tommy Hendrickson, and he's like, let's use that for them too. And I said, no, man, that's for me. And he's like, what? And I'm like, I really want that for myself. And he's like, bro, you're gonna write like hundreds of those. Like, let's use that. And to be honest, I couldn't even tell you what that riff was, or what it's so forgotten now.
mm-hmm.
But I didn't use it for Hailstorm when I probably should have. And like, you know, there's these ego, young, stupid minded thoughts that if only I could go back in time, be like, bro, get it together, man. You know,
pride and ego, man. It's a double-edged sword. It's the thing that gives you the confidence to do it, but it's also it can lead to some regrettable decisions. But I think it's a good place to end it, because I actually have to go in like 2 minutes. So I have another podcast starting, but I want to thank you for coming on, man. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
I couldn't say more to you, man. It's been a very, very deep conversation. I like deep conversations and getting really down to, you know, instead of, and I love the fact that the questions or the talks weren't like I've usually had on interviews or podcasts. I like getting deep, and I like getting down to the nitty gritty on things, and maybe giving a different perspective for people out there that might be like, oh, whatever, man, you know, like, to really dive into the reality of certain things too.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. I guess the thing is, the podcast takes up time, and it's valuable to me. And if I was just reading press releases and asking a bunch of questions from them, that's not what I'm here to do in this world. And I just went through a press cycle myself, and you know, I'm thankful for doing interviews, but literally, as you know, 98% of them are just reading off the press release. And look, it's good to get the word out. It's good for SEO, but like, I don't want to do a podcast. If that's like what we're doing, I'd rather just not do it. Like, I'm here to have conversations with like minds, and otherwise I don't want to do a podcast.
Well, let's do it again. I feel there's a lot more we can talk about.
For sure. Anytime, man.
Well, it's an honor, and thank you for having me. I mean, I really can't say anything more highly about you in the future as well. So
thanks, man. Keep in touch, man. Have a good one.
Absolutely. Back at you.
Yeah. Take it easy.